I am Jeff Ado. This is Lunacy, where we discern the sacred from the insane and admit that whether we like it or not, we are all profoundly affected by the cycles of the moon. Nice. That was forthright. I like it. Boom. Give it to me. Shatak. Lunacy is a luminary podcast. My luminary guest today is my dear friend Mica Balubach. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yes. Balubach. Mica Balubach. Mica is an alchemist. And before you think he's like, that's like saying he's like a warlock, because I feel like credibility, wise, it's kind of the same thing. Are you a warlock or an alchemist, But no, really, he's an authentic, actual alchemist. And I don't mean that he's, futzing around in his basement with, garbage or whatever.
I mean, yeah, sometimes.
Okay. Occasionally garbage. But he really makes things. He makes tinctures and different things that are useful for people. I've sampled some of those. I think we'll probably talk a little bit about some of that stuff for sure. But he's also somebody that's a very deep student of alchemy and in its original form and knows a lot about the history of alchemy and how it relates to modern society and what we have today and, the mythology and all that shit. So we're talking about it, all right, because it's interesting. And it also relates to Egypt, which was our last podcast. So here we go. Mm-hmm. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah. Really stoked to be here. And yeah, it's an honor to finally be in the hot seat with you, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a while. We've been talking about it. We've been discussing it. There have been discussions for a long time about doing this exact thing that we're doing right now.
Totally.
Now we're
a couple of
fucking
years,
doing
I
it.
think, listening to a few years and then being inspired. So
yeah, well, you need to go back and listen to all of them.
I think
then
I do.
We'll record.
There's some good stuff there.
There is actually some great stuff in there for sure. On account of my guests, let's just start with what for people who don't know, because like I said, if I say alchemy, people are like, what kind of bullshit magic are you talking about? Alchemy, people don't know. I didn't know. I had similar perspective until like I met you. When I first met you, I was like, you're an alchemist. This guy. And then like I said, I sampled some of the things that you had to offer, and I was like, oh wow, that's a real difference. And you showed me some of the implements and instruments that you use. And now I get it. It's a real thing. So let's just talk about, first of all, kind of how did you get into alchemy? Like, what's the source of your interest in this field?
For a long time, I was an herbalist, practicing herbalist, which is obviously the plant realm, the first triad, part of the triad in alchemy. And I, learned flora and wanted to identify and understand plant life. And so I actually toured a lot of the West Coast and, Middle America, finding this stuff in real time and going to like a bunch of BLM properties and being able to kind of harvest and check things and look into like how this stuff proliferates in the wild. And yeah, I was doing, the standard traditional herbal preparations back then, learning from one of my teachers who was an amazing woman who's also somewhat of a witch and she gave me a little bit of an apprenticeship. She's in Texas and I got to learn the hill country out there and then just took it around the world, kind of like finding new exotic plants and things that really interest me and then understanding their medicinal profiles from there. But what got me into alchemy would have been when I was first passed one of my teacher's books. His name is Robert Allen Bartlett. He's actually carrying the majority of the Western tradition on his shoulders, and he's practicing up in Washington, and he's got a school. So I received his book first, which is Real Alchemy, it's called. And I was just like you. I didn't really think that a lot of the stuff was as real as most people say it was, or maybe it was a bit more philosophical. And so then I started to look into some of his texts, and a lot of these practices are deeply seated in, what were the precursors of chemistry. And not only that, but it's even part of a lot of inward transformational processes. So a lot of this stuff goes both ways, and it was really dense. A lot of the practices seemed basic, but once you started to get into them, they were like shifting a lot on the inside, and even my perception started to change. So yeah, I ended up reading a lot of his literature, practicing what I could on my own, finding like-minded friends who were somewhat kind of on the path. and we would do our own extractions or our own full moon rituals of things that we like to do. And yeah, it took a while before I actually got to meet the guy. Honestly, I only met him like 4 years ago, and was lucky enough to bring him all of his predecessor, his teacher's books, which were stashed in Utah, Salt Lake City. And through, the line of friends who all kind of worked with him and were filming his classes, I just got the chance to bring this up, and then also got to stay for an entire week of recording of his classes. And that just set me on the path, because I met the guy, and it was like a huge trade-off, bringing first edition texts, from the 70s and 80s, and, astrocyclical charts, that are before my time, that I'm drooling over in boxes to him, and he's seeing them for the first time in ages. It's an amazing experience. And so, of course, it was very valuable. And, I did this whole trip. And so they gave me a full access to all of his coursework. And then I just immediately started to study and follow all of his work and really just take it seriously. But, I'd built somewhat of a lab over the course of years where I was doing other work with, other plants and, doing my own stuff for a while. But it really set in when I finally got to start to practice this stuff on my own, in my own lab. But yeah, starting with the plants, then going into the animals, and then finally into the minerals. Sort of how the whole, idea of alchemy is all triads. It's basically a giant.
Yeah. So give us the fundamental breakdown. Like, what is alchemy?
Alchemy, I guess the best way to describe, if you were to just discuss exactly alchemy, it's essentially like the relationship between conscious and matter. And that's deeply seated in how we perceive things and then how they're affected, but with the caveat of having an intermediary. Because what I'm talking about, what most people hear there is the polarity of this and that. But you can't just have this and that, even in a world where we live in a binary star system. We have this and that, but we have the intermediary. The only way to experience the this and that is the self or the mind. That's the animating force. So with that comes the triad, or the divine triptych, which is this, that, and the other. In alchemy, it's known as sulfur, mercury, and salt. Sulfur being the originating formless place where everything comes from. So that would be your soul or consciousness itself. And then coming from that formlessness, it comes down and descends into the mind, which would be the mercury. And that's what we consider spirit. And then from spirit or the mind, you come into the body. So that's physical form. And that would be like your mineral content or salt. So it's essentially the relationship between conscious and matter, and understanding, how we can perceive ourselves, and how when we perceive things differently, they shift. It's not just laboratory alchemy. A lot of people have volumes of work on Jungian transpersonal psychology. That's very much inward, but it also goes outward. That's going to be the body and like the grounded aspects of things, like the laboratory work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, they've proven, no doubt, that the observer affects particles and atoms at CERN and elsewhere. So that sort of comports with the modern scientists. See that also. We're observing things, and by observing them, we change them. That's the truth about it. So it makes sense that they were thinking that back in the day, and still thinking it today.
Totally.
Let's talk about the origins of alchemy. Where does it come from?
Honestly, I would say, alchemy probably predates human civilization. Most people would say it originated in Egypt, but I would definitely beg to differ that Egypt was probably just one of its most fertile cradles where it flourished, since Egypt was, towards the tail end of the Golden Age. But it was by far, in my opinion, brought here by intelligences far beyond us, and then translated into humanity and found its way into our culture and started to work its way through things. Because, it is the way everything works, the study of how all matter works. But yeah, a lot of people say it comes from Egypt. That's very prevalent. There's a lot of things that back that up. Namely, Egyptian priestcraft, the stories of their metallurgists who can transform base metals specifically, like how they were actually targeted by the Roman Empire, and like 292 AD by Diocletian submitted an edict, to completely eradicate all alchemical texts because he was worried that they were going to debase their currency. And so he sent, his entire army down to basically burn down Alexandria. They definitely took the goodies because they knew it was real, and they knew that there was some substance there that they could probably use themselves. But yeah, I mean, it then flourished, from Egypt.
What's that guy's name?
Diocletian.
What a fucker.
Total
You know what I mean?
asshole.
What a dick.
Yeah.
Diocletian. I hope you're rolling over in your grave.
I mean, that's Rome's,
Jerk.
Rome's story is pretty weak, if you ask me. It was pretty lame. They definitely were around for a while, but didn't really go anywhere. But, they dissolved into Byzantium and all the other things, but it's nowhere to be seen anymore. Egypt, however, lives on in many different ways, as you have experienced in your trip.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what they brought to the table is timeless. From Egypt, you had a lot of the Grecian influence. They were coming in, a lot of the philosophers were coming in to study a lot of Egyptian alchemy, and they were bringing it into their own world, and it was being translated into Greek and translated into the philosophical sense, where Egypt was very matter of fact, but they were completely embodied. That's what their goal was in Egypt. We're exactly doing the first passage of the Emerald Tablet, which was, that and the other. So basically, that which is above corresponds to that which is below. That which is below corresponds to that which is above, to create the universal miracle of the one thing, which they were doing in their temples, their rituals. Everything was about that. They wanted to bring the heavens down to the earth. So they were embodied, but then you had, a lot of Arabic and Greek philosophers and initiates coming into study and then translate it out from there, which then you get into some of the interesting aspects that I've studied a lot of, which is iconography. So they definitely wanted to protect this knowledge because it was being targeted. Mm-hmm. It's like a witch hunt.
Yeah.
So they seeded it into this symbology and this iconography and symbology that not a lot of uninitiated could read.
You're talking about like hieroglyphics?
Close. Yeah. Similar, but not quite. But if you look into like alchemical symbology, there's both symbols and then there's iconography. And iconography is an entire image depiction where the subjects and the actions and framing of what's happening in the image all corresponds to, let's say, a formula for creating gold or breaking gold down, or finding a universal alchemist that you create to break these substances down. And it was all seeded into like this imagery, super beautiful. I mean, it goes on into like the 13th century, 14th century, 15th century, where you have these manuscripts. But it came from, these Arabic philosophers and these Greek philosophers. So it changed languages 3 times, and then it gets filtered into these iconography manuscripts. So it went into a whole spiral. And of course, because it was, hunted, it's not like everyone was studying it. Mm-hmm. But, it then kind of created this disconnect where uninitiated didn't know what was going on. So it definitely created a lot of projection, where people started to create the transpersonal Jungian psychology aspects, and like it was all internal, and maybe it's all just a big myth, or it's all just internal philosophy when it's really everything. But of course, the downfall of man into the Dark Ages and everything went downhill. So it's not like that wasn't to be expected.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Coming out of the Dark Ages.
Barely.
Maybe. Hopefully.
Let's hope so.
Well, we're going straight down the hole. Who knows? There's a couple things. One, Egypt was originally Kemet, which alchemy, whatever.
Yeah,
it's
the
related.
original name, Kemet.
And then there's a lot of theories and or maps and or factual information that link Egypt to Atlantis. which sort of that's another thing people scoff at and laugh at, myself included, until I found out Plato was writing about it. And then I was like, oh, well, he's a pretty credible source as far as, I don't know, democracy is concerned. There's a strong theory that alchemy originates in Atlantis and then transferred over to Egypt and then maybe the Mayan culture as well, and just moved kind of all over the world. And then who knows what happened before Atlantis. There was probably something else going on cooking.
I mean, the name itself, alchemy is Arabic. It's the prefix al is the, chemia is black arts. Most people think it's like a sinister thing, or it's like, dark magic. Just means
it sounds like dark magic when you call it the black arts. You know what I mean?
does.
I didn't realize you were a black artist. I got to get you off the program. Are there any witch hunters out there? Yeah. Please show up. My address is never mind.
Yeah, please. But yeah, alchemia, well, that's what they call it in Arabic, and alchemia is the black arts. And what that actually referenced was the black sands that wash up on the Nile.
Yeah.
Being such a fertile area, the only way that life could exist in the desert like that. Mm-hmm. You can connect it in many different ways, where it's like philosophically, it's like the dark, fertile, like womb space of where no thing exists and is coming into form. And so
the void.
And
it refers to that and not the devil.
The deep, dark, celestial atmosphere. Things that,
right.
Where Egypt was pulling all of its wisdom and knowledge from, the star system.
Yeah. The dark arts refer to the darkness, not evil things.
Totally.
Yeah, it's totally separate. You mentioned that there was a lot of protection to keep this knowledge from the uninitiated. And so that's interesting on several fronts. One, as you mentioned, these folks were being hunted
multiple times in different centuries.
Because if some of the knowledge or ways of doing things were to get out, it would upset
the balance.
And it would also upset the empire model, which is what we're dealing with now as well. The idea that we can harness free energy and what Tesla was up to before they killed him.
For sure.
That whole thing would really upset a few people being in control and the classist society and all that. Not that I'm not a communist, all right? I think there's a different, there's a third path, all right?
There's definitely a third path.
Not trying to get you
money,
many
folks.
Paths. There's a lot of paths, but there also is a path of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
I went inside the Great Pyramid.
Awesome.
People were not climbing up and down these shafts. They weren't for people. It's super crunched and crowded, and I don't know exactly what they were for. I went up and down and all around inside that sucker. Mm-hmm. Aside from there are rooms that you can't get to that are blocked off, and who knows what was going on over there. But the pyramids were encased in granite, which was an insulator, and then on the outside, limestone, which is a conductor. There's no reason to do that unless you were creating a battery.
There's also facts that state that the plateau is actually flooded, or would be flooded at times.
Yeah,
and that would actually cover the bases of the pyramids when needed. The Nile would flow over, but makes lots of sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of big fat questions that lead us to the idea that there was something way bigger going on there, and certainly visiting these temples, there's just no way. It's beyond our technology now to do what they did in terms of the precision and the laser accuracy and the angles of everything,
and beyond, I think, the cultures that were potentially even using it for quote unquote burial grounds, or what most people had said it was.
Yeah.
It predates that. Some of the ancient Egypts probably just stumbled upon these things. They were ancient to them.
Right.
Look at the Sphinx. The Sphinx has many, it looks like, ages that you can predate from.
Yeah, because they carbon dated the base to 30,000 years.
Yeah, so it makes sense. These things were used for alchemical purposes.
Right. And so then that raises the question back to the uninitiated thing, because ostensibly there's knowledge that one could use that's alchemical knowledge that would give that person great power. And if in the wrong hands, then that power could be misused, like you see maybe happening around the world today.
I would say so.
With weapons and all this stuff. Yeah. So there's a thing about, you mentioned to protect the knowledge from the uninitiated. Mm-hmm. The process of initiation into being granted this kind of alchemical knowledge, I speculate that there was some process that was going on to make sure that you were pure of heart and that you were really acting out of service and a love for humanity
and humbleness
and humility
yeah
in order to receive this knowledge. Because if not, then you might misuse it.
most people would agree that most arts, most forms of practicing alchemy are extremely humbling. Like, you're going to mess up. You're going to mess up a million times, most of the time on, your own behalf and to your own detriment, but that's why it's so raw and so real, as it is a process that's, it's a single pathway. You have to climb that, staircase, and you have to get to the top, and it's one way.
But do you also think that there was like a process of initiation for people to be able to have access to certain knowledge?
I mean, maybe in different schools like Egyptian priestcraft and, when they were practicing different like metallurgical sciences in Egypt, I'm sure there was maybe like some vetting process. But to get to the advanced works, let's like say like, the Philosopher Stone, which it wasn't called that back in the day. It was no such thing. It was, just perfected matter, or, creating the Elixir of Life. I'm sure there was a lot of circles of protection around that wisdom and like making and working with that type of material.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, it's very real. This stuff isn't just, lore. It's not just like a concept. It is a concept, but it's very real. And it actually has probably played a lot bigger roles on the outcomes of history than we give it credit for. Things like the Ark of the Covenant, things like that keep getting relocated to different like shrines. And, obviously a few of them, or a majority of them, are in possession of some individuals and groups that we don't really think are doing great things. Mm-hmm. But there's always conflict and things arising around this stuff. And like, it's because these things are extremely powerful. Mm-hmm. And not only powerful, but they're like mini pyramids. They're like extremely conductive. Yeah. And encased even inside these like ridiculous box shrines, they have to be handled by rubber gloves and boots, because like you can essentially get shocked by lightning when you're carrying it or something. It's really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Tim Hogan, who's the current Grand Master of the Knights Templars, talking about, well, they've got, I think he said 6 arcs that they've collected from around the world that they have in secret places. Mm-hmm. And they know that they were used to generate power. They're unveiling a lot of secrets about all of that right now.
Super cool. Yeah, I mean, especially right now, it's like, you have pretty open borders with a lot of the Masonic knowledge, and, sort of these secret societies are actually pretty open these days. Yeah. You can research a lot of this stuff you can find on the internet. There's also a lot of, initiates that probably fell out that readily share a lot of this stuff, but, they're not supposed to, but these days it seems pretty available. Yeah. So it's pretty cool to see.
I've been watching his show and also listening to some programs.
He has a show.
He has a show, and he just did an episode with Aubrey Marcus. That's great. Go Aubrey. Go Tim. I love you guys. But, in there he talks about, well, now we're entering, we fully entered the age of Aquarius, which is not Aquarius, all right? Aquarius. It's Cubanus. It's a fucking polyhexagonal is what it is, all right? They get into the polymathery of it all.
Aquarius. We've actually entered in the age of Aquarius.
We've actually entered into it, and the whole idea is this is the time of open knowledge and people knowing the truth about our history, where we've come from, about Christianity. I mean, he gets into all kinds of stuff about Yeshua and the true life of Yeshua.
Yeah, I mean, look at what the internet did to society, man. That's like, people talk about the Great Flood. It's like that was the deluge, was information. Like, we are inundated with so much information on a daily basis. We don't even know what to do with it. It's like...
It's true.
And also, you don't know what to choose. It's real. And now we have AI, and it's like changing all that too. It's like...
Hopefully it's going to help us.
Let's hope so.
We'll see. But yeah, the Ark of the Covenant, I mean, that's a real thing. It was a real power source. There's a lot of ideas around that was used to move all of these giant, many ton stones and put them exactly into place. Who knows how they did it. But that was part of the whole infrastructure, the technology that they were using back then. You mentioned the Philosopher's Stone. What the fuck is that? All right. Is it a rock that you throw at people when you're trying to get them to do good? That's what you do, right? You're fucking it up.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting stoned with the Philosopher's Stone, all right? Get ready. Stop screwing it up, your life. You're going to get fucking Philosopher stoned.
Yeah, that's how they would get stoned back in the day. They would get this Philosopher's Stone and just take a fat rip. No, the Philosopher's Stone is real. A lot of people think it's lore. It's a real substance. And, in the practice of...
Is it a rock? Why is it called a stone?
It kind of, it's smaller though. I'm sure there's larger ones, like what they might be using in, a system like the Ark or something. But it's small because you grow it. And it's perfected matter in its most exalted state. But it would be similar to like what a crystal is. And it might look, like ruby red, almost like like a ruby or something like that. I think there's different colors, but namely I know that there's a ruby red version, and there's pathways to get to it, and these take like years, not only to maybe understand these pathways and get to that place in your life where you're about to actually take this on, but then to actually perform it. And you can imagine that any number of things can go wrong along the way. So while you're doing this, it's working on you. It's a practice that's taking you into states of perfection at the same time. It's a physical thing, and the physical thing has the ability to transmute like base metals, to shift, perfected matter, because itself is exalted in the most perfect state. The liquid form of that would be the Elixir of Life. And the Elixir of Life is more for consumption. And most people think like Elixir of Life gives you like immortality.
Or they think it's a bunch of horse shit.
Yeah, or they think it's a bunch of horse shit. But
not me. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't drank it.
Well, in order to make it, you have to burn horse shit down for days and days and days and days and days until you get to the center of the universe.
You're giving us the formula.
Yeah, the center of the Tootsie Pop.
It's all horse shit.
Yeah, it's all horse shit. There's a lot of stuff like that in iconography too that you could probably pick up. That's, it's pretty funny how they, frame the pathway to get things. And I'm sure there's a lot of gatekeepers and doors and, things that you'll run into. But namely, there are ways to achieve certain things with shit and piss.
Oh, you're being serious.
I'm being dead serious.
Oh, wow. I thought you were just playing along with my joviality.
The reality, too, is that, you can make a stone out of anything in alchemy. The entire plant kingdom, majority of everything can be made into a stone. Say, for instance, rosemary. You can make a stone, make a crystal.
Have you made a stone out of rosemary?
No. I personally have not taken the time to do this, but it's because it's time consuming and it's going to require a lot of attention to nursing this thing along. But it takes years in most instances. But you're working with highly purified versions of the three principles, which is mercury, sulfur, and salt. And those are purified to some of their most exalted states and then recombined and fed to each other in ways that in an incubated state, it starts to actually congeal, goes through this congealing process, and then goes through a crystallization process. So yeah, you can crystallize or make a stone out of most things.
And you've seen somebody do this, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
My teacher specifically had a few stones that were being incubated when I went to his lab. But like I said, urine and shit is also another thing that you can, there's pathways to make a urine stone. And the cool part about these stones, though, is that you can then kind of shortcut your work. Once you create a stone, it's sort of like an instant quintessence. The most traditional form of alchemy is, spagyrics. And spagyrics is can be anywhere from a crude version to like a more advanced formulation where you're incorporating things like fermentation that take months to then, create an alcohol of the plant, distill it, get it to a high proof version of that, and then you're extracting itself with its own alcohol, and then you're removing the plant that's been extracted and burning it down because it's saturated in ethanol, and then you're getting the mineral salts out, and then you're reacting those mineral salts with its own basically spirit in its own spirit. And that's super advanced, it's a little bit longer.
That's some of the stuff that you will do.
Yeah, I work with ultrasonics, so ultrasonics speed up a lot of the process. Nowadays we have things like modern chemistry, and modern chemistry and, lab equipment have just accelerated, all alchemical works. You can take something that probably would have taken an alchemist like a friggin' year and take it down to like a couple days, if you do it right within means. Cause you got to remember that the whole path in working with alchemy is you want to work with nature's design. You don't want to break the rules. Chemistry breaks the rules. like, lots of respect for it. I think it's really cool and it's an amazing discipline. But what it's forgetting is the holistic model. It's kind of going in and isolating one little thing and then removing it, and then maybe even taking that design and being like, oh, this is the molecule and designed for this, and let's now synthesize this in a lab and grow it ourselves with these other things. Mm-hmm. It's void of an actual animating spirit or soul. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much null. It's going to give you a physical effect, an acute effect, but through the layers of the soul and the mind, it's not going to really be there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this
comes back to like the thing I always think about is willow bark and aspirin. And
great example.
I've talked about this with a couple of different people, Mariah Ganessa, and I discussed it on our podcast about Four Visions and what she's up to. But like Peruvian shamans, the Amazonian shamans brought willow bark and said this helps headaches. And then it was extracted in the 80s to make aspirin, but it causes all kind of stomach problems when you just take it. But it doesn't cause that when you take the willow bark, because the willow bark has all the things that would prevent you from having any problems, but also alleviates the headache.
Yeah, it has its own built-in carminative system. It's got its own ability to base.
Yeah, they broke the rules, as you say. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, at the end of the day, really it's the difference of having a sentient awareness that's, existing in all life form that's natural. And then the difference of isolating something and making it completely alienated from its actual design and putting it into systems and introducing all kinds of disease and problems and, things that just don't, they're byproducts of a mismatched design, to work in alchemy with sentient awareness. The sentience is what makes the product charged with the divine essence, the divine soul.
Yeah, that's really great. So I want to come back to this, but we haven't finished the Philosopher's Stone thing. I made the jokes about the Elixirs of Life, and I think people are going to be pissed off, including myself, if I don't get the answers. So the Philosopher's Stone is something that you can make. It takes years to make. It is perfected matter. As you're making it, it helps to perfect you in terms of like your own personal transformation and understanding of reality, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. I mean, not only because you got to imagine like the discipline of working on these things is insane. It's like you're dedicating probably most of your life to that, and then like, you don't, especially something that takes years to complete, you don't want to slip up and then have to start over. So it's a lot of dedicated attention and awareness. I mean, just for an example of something way lesser than that would be me working with a client project. And like, let's say I have a certain amount of money sent to me to finish the project. I don't want to mess that up because then I'm going to have to pay out of pocket to fix it. That's a really small repercussion compared to working on something that just took me 2 years and having to start from scratch. So it's a lot of dedication and pure attention span and like the tension of the attention, like the constant tension of that attention creates a lot of discipline in oneself. So it's that, but it's also the corridors of awareness you're walking through as you see how the creator uses his paintbrush, which is amazing. It's like stuff you can't learn from a textbook or from talking to someone or from non-experiential wisdom. It has to be embodied to know it. And that's invaluable.
It has to be gnosis.
Gnosis.
Yeah. Okay, so what does the Philosopher's Stone do? So you make this little rock, and then you throw it at your friends when they're being dicks. And all of a sudden they're really nice. I would love that rock. I want that.
Exactly.
Couldn't we all use that rock, friends?
It's a great rock.
Your wife's being, or your husband's being whatever, and you just take this rock and like, not hard. You just throw it at them and it hits them, and then they're like, "Hey, honey, I love you." It's just what does it actually do?
What it actually does, it does a lot of things, but namely, I would say one of the most popularized uses of this tool would be to transmute base metals.
Okay.
So let's say turning, lead into gold, turning, silver into gold, which is like metallurgical sciences, which is an amazing feat to do. You could, because essentially what we're looking at is that gold is the most ascended form of matter on this planet.
Okay.
So everything is in a pathway to gold.
Is that true in terms of like chemistry too? Or
this is more like alchemical
okay.
framework. Chemistry might think something else, otherwise, and might have a different way of looking at things. But, if we look at all matter on the planet, gold would be considered the most ascended, exalted form of matter. Mm-hmm. And that everything is in a pathway to get to something like that.
Okay.
In alchemy, we say all matter is in a state of working towards perfection. In alchemy, we just speed that up. So it's just a matter of how you do it, though. Because, I mean, like I said, chemistry is going to cut a bunch of corners. It's going to, cause a bunch of ripples. And it might work temporarily, but it's not permanent. And like in alchemy, we're looking for immortal. That's the whole goal of this.
And so on that note, so you say you can take the Philosopher's Stone and liquefy it and then drink it, and then people think that it grants you immortality. Mm-hmm. What does it do?
Namely, it's going to really, it would just probably ultimately set back a lot of disease and virus in the body. It would most likely make you live a much longer life. I have theories that there are, many alchemists out there today that do perform these works behind closed doors and are either consuming this themselves or, using it as a tool in other sense. And they're using it to then also pursue the great works, because there's more advanced works beyond just these things that we know of. And I'm sure the path gets much longer than we can understand. Most alchemists look at, a certain number of textbooks and wisdom, and they are looking at multiple lifetimes of study, But if you wanted to get it done in one go, maybe you start with making the stone. You start to understand ways to extend your ability to be here and be a part of this and work with it. But
so it would extend your life.
Extends life.
And how do you know this thing is real, Mica? Because
I've
speculation. Oh, you saw one.
I've seen it.
Where'd you see it?
I've seen it in my teacher's lab.
Oh, do people know that?
Yeah.
Are we getting him in trouble?
Do you want to hear a crazy story?
Is it like, am I going to release this podcast and then like people are going to storm your teacher's door? Well, I mean, they wouldn't find shit here. Okay.
No, they already know how to do this. If you're talking about the deep state and the evil empire that rules this world, they've already known how to do this for centuries. So they're not worried.
But like, there's not going to be a bunch of weirdos that show up to Robert's door. And
there's weirdos that show up there, but they're the ones that want to learn from him and go to his classes. And
weirdos like you.
Like me. And it's as much as you think something like that would be is the most sacred thing that someone would carry with extreme reverence. There's a story of him bringing in a group of students to his lab. I mean, this guy's an old wizard, dude. He's an amazing human, but he's also, he's getting older, and has a huge passion for teaching, and he loves sharing his knowledge. And he's also performing these works, in tandem, and he wants to teach people it. So he's doing this as well as teaching it. And in his lab, it's pretty tight quarters, it's very small space. You wouldn't think my lab is bigger than his, which is hilarious. But, it's very tight corners and it's super dense and whatever. And he was showing his students this Elixir of Life at one point, and one of them spilt it over on the ground. Done. Years of work. Probably longer than that. Could have been like 5, who knows. But anyways, needless to say, that guy was kicked out.
Yeah.
And probably embarrassed for life.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm shocked to hear that he actually had allowed people to be around it like that in any capacity. I would have probably had it behind a glass case or something like that. But, he's done it a few times. He's done it multiple times.
Oh,
so.
Does he drink it?
I don't know. It doesn't seem like it.
No, it doesn't seem like it. He's old.
Who knows? It doesn't seem like he's, doing that.
Okay.
He doesn't have the vampire look to him. It's like he's 78 and he looks like he's 25 or something.
Right.
He looks like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah.
They have work done.
Something. They've got something going on. I don't know what.
It's all about microneedling, people. All right? Try the microneedling. It works. I'm into it.
Nice.
Stimulates your natural collagen so that your wrinkles get, sort of erased. Very nice.
That's a great tool. I mean, I've never worked with it before. You know what else is great for collagen? Sea moss.
Oh, yeah.
And elk antler.
That's one of the things that I wanted to discuss, because I'm sure, people may have questions or they might want to get in contact with you. How do people reach you?
Right now, the best way to contact me would be on Instagram. I My moniker is Axiom Apothecary. You can find my Instagram under Axiom Formulas, Axiom_formulas. And
AXIOM
AXIOM_formulas. Mm-hmm.
So that's how they can get in touch with it. They could send you messages.
Yeah, feel free. Reach out on, send me a direct message. Follow me for some information if you want to see some stuff in action. And yeah, I'm consistently posting things, updating things about new products, showcasing some of my client works. Right now, but mainly focusing on client work, doing work for white label for other supplement brands. And I'm really stoked to be doing that because these are a lot of my friends and they're really successful guys doing amazing work, bringing this to the people, which I really appreciate because it's a skill I don't have. Mm-hmm. I like to be in closed doors and I like to kind of,
you want to be in the lab,
meander around in the darkness and into the late hours of the night doing things by myself.
Right.
Or with one really close friend, listening to good music. And, then having a friend that can bring that to the people is priceless.
So what kind of products, you mentioned elk antler, you mentioned sea moss. What does elk antler do? Gives you a boner?
Yeah, it can. Absolutely. The elk antler, it does stimulate the endocrine system. It's an amazing support for men who are probably depleted in the testosterone department, but it's not said to have been studied to do that. But it does support that system, so it indirectly would, help produce more testosterone in the body. It's also mostly known for one of its peptides, which it doesn't necessarily have a lot of, but it helps to produce in the body. It contains a bunch of signaling peptides that produce IGF in the human body. And what that does...
Is that growth hormone? What is that?
Yeah, IGF is insulin-like growth factor.
Insulin growth factor, okay.
And so it helps the body replenish and repair and grow, proliferate its cell tissues. And it does so because, deer and elk antler, the cervid species, are the fastest growing tissues on the planet. They grow and shed their antlers, full antlers, in a season. So,
wow.
Yeah.
They're big antlers.
I know.
Every season they get new ones.
I didn't know that for a long time, but you go into the wild, and I once saw it in real action before I was doing this work. But I saw two animals sparring, and it was a deer and a deer, and they're sparring because they're trying to rip their antlers off because they know it's time. It's really violent. It's really bloody, and they got flesh and blood are ripped all over the place from their heads. They'll be pouring blood and flesh. It's really violent. So it's kind of
deer or elk. We're doing this.
Both. Well, the deer that I saw.
Oh, okay. You saw the deer.
It's in California.
But it's the same. Woods. They're all doing the same thing. Okay.
They're the same thing. But that's why you have amazing, farmers and ranchers out there that care for these animals and will bring this medicine to the people. Specifically, I have an amazing relationship with this gentleman named Jade of Cervid Labs and also Noble Elk Farms. And I work with him to bring his amazing material into my lab, and then I go through a process of producing a spagyric extraction of not only the flesh, the velvet, but also the tips, the bulbs, the uppers, each one requiring different extraction pathways. But needless to say, they both go to an upstream process that helps me to sort of strip off a lot of the unneededs, but keep it in a spagyric framework.
Can you tell people what a spagyric is?
Totally. So a spagyric is I would say the first step in an alchemical process. The name spagyric was coined by a gentleman named Paracelsus. And he was an individual that did amazing work for alchemy. He created a school, was teaching somewhat of a college setting, a lot of people, including my teacher. So he was, predecessors of a lot of amazing alchemists today. But he coined the term spagyric. Namely, what it is a perfection pathway to isolate and purify the three immortal manifestations in all living things, namely the salt, sulfur, and mercury. So with a spagyric, the most simple way you would go about this would be to take your subject and extract it with a solvent, and then remove that material, incinerate it, and burn it down to a white ash.
Which is what you were just talking about. You were just talking about taking the antlers and burning it down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
White ash. And the white ash is the first step. You definitely want to take it further than that. White ash is
You said definitely. I like that you said definitely.
Most definitely.
I'm gonna start using that. Definitely. Are you sure? Definitely.
Most definitely.
So you turn it into white ash.
You turn it into white ash. The white ash is a crude form of that. What you would do is then leach out your mineral salts using a water or vinegar and water mixture.
Naturally.
And it's what's called, they call lixiviation. And lixiviation is...
Elixiviation. Of course they call it that. That sounds sexy.
is when you remove the mineral salts from a solution that you pulled them from of the ash.
Okay.
So then you have your purified mineral salts. Of course, you evaporate it down. What you're doing is you're reincorporating that mineral salt base back into the extract you've made using whatever solvent you've used. Because what you normally would have, specifically based on whatever your solvent base was, with ethanol, you would get the sulfur and the mercury. That's the kind of, when you're doing a simple version, this is a lot easier. But advanced wise, when you're going into the deeper realms and you're kind of perfecting this at a much deeper level, you would be doing an essential oil pull, and getting the sulfur. That essential oil is a perfect representation of sulfur in alchemy. It's the soul, it's the essence. So when you think of essence, essential oil, that's the sulfur. So that's the consciousness.
Not the stinky sulfur, the term sulfur.
Not the stinky. It's spelled differently too. So
okay, good. That's good. That's
with
good
an F
clarify.
and not a PH.
Oh,
so.
good. It's S-U-L-F-U-R.
Yeah.
Not the PH.
Yeah,
Not the
totally.
shitty smelling stuff that
No,
we don't
thank
like.
God.
I see. Okay, cool.
So you would purify these three immortals and then recombine them, and they create a reaction. Once you've purified these three immortals and you put them back together, they have this reaction together. And at that point in time, when you put them together, you can then create a birth chart for that spagyric in that moment when you do that.
A birth chart?
Yeah. Everything.
What are you talking about? Are you bringing astrology into it? What are you doing there, Jack?
Huge.
You got to fucking do the time stamp on it?
There's even, there's things like astronomical charts that individuals have built out that name specific times of the year where it's perfect to do specific processes.
Really?
Yeah.
And it really has an impact.
Yeah. Namely, just for instance, you don't want to be extracting something into the full moon. You want to be extracting something about now on the full moon.
Yeah, today's a full moon.
Weeks later as it's going away.
Today, by the way, is February 1st that we're recording this. It is the full moon. So back to the elk antler. So you take the elk antler, you put it into the ash, you boil it down into the sulfur, the essence.
The sulfur would
and then you put it back together again.
Put it back together again, yeah.
And then there's a reaction and there's a birth chart.
Yeah.
What do you mean there's a birth chart?
For every extract, you're going through this process of disillusionment. You're going through a death portal. So you're taking something that was once alive and animated, and you're going through a death portal, and then you're rebirthing it in the other side. When you create the reaction of its three immortal principles that are purified back together, it has then been rebirthed or rebooted or respawned, resurrected.
Wow.
So
in like a real way.
Absolutely. It's immortal at that point. You got to imagine, what was going to be crude and putrefied, like flesh especially, will putrefy over time. It can be a pathway to getting to something in alchemy, of course, but just letting it do that, putrefy, and it's going to rot and die, But when we go through these methodologies of purifying these substances, they go through purification rites, and then they're purified parts, and they're immortal because it contains the three immortal manifestations that survive everything. So, minerals can survive insane heats. Like my kiln that I use to burn things down is running at like over 1,000 degrees. And that, for the antler aspect of this process, is running for multiple days in what's called a philosophic egg. 2 halves of a circle, so like a crucible. And you put your material that you want to burn inside, and then you take a wetted clay smeared cloth and you seal the edges.
What's the egg made out of?
It's
philosophy?
It's quartz.
Oh, it's quartz, crystal.
Quartz, and what we normally use to burn in a kiln. And you then insert, your subject, and then you use a clay smeared cloth of the same clay and quartz mixture. Seal that, lightly seal it in the kiln, and then you ramp up the heat. And this alchemists were doing the same thing with like horse shit. You know, they would bury horse shit in the ground to get specific mineral profiles and burn it in a fire that is below the earth at extreme temperatures. And these are some of like the Indian Bosma techniques and stuff considered like close to that.
India.
They
Okay.
have their own form of alchemy, of course, translated from the source.
Right.
But yeah, these, you know, deeper mineral profiles, especially in like things like phosphorized bone, extremely hard to get out. That's what antler is. It's phosphorized bone. So in order to do that, you have to heat this material for a number of days in a sealed philosophic egg. And then at the end, you know, after day 4, you go up and you crack open the egg and you open it up and you've gotten much lighter. And the whole point, you want to get it as white as you can possibly get. The darker
ash.
the material, right? The darker the material, the less of the mineral profile you're going to get out because it hasn't fully burnt down. It hasn't fully opened up the way that you would allow like a porous surface to allow liquid to flush through. But I use ultrasonics, which is a modern technology, and where most people would be using, you know, what's called a Soxhlet system, which is like sort of a closed loop distillation train that, you know, allows your solvent to evaporate up like a coil and then condense back down and then go right back into the material and keeps doing that in like a train over and over and over and over again. That's one version. It's kind of what it's been done for a long time to create quick extracts. But now we have modern technology and we've gotten ultrasonics, and ultrasonics are amazing. They create what's called ultrasonic cavitation, and the cavitation implodes these molecules kind of like a toroidal field, and then it will flush this solvent through it and sort of rip out all of these actives that, you know, pair with the solvent without rupturing the base material. It definitely does increase heat over time, but what you get is the ability to bypass any thermal degradation or chemical or solvent degradation using harsh chemicals or heat. And you get to fully wash through the molecular level of these sources and pull out an amazingly preserved extract. But
I totally understood everything you just said, in case anyone's wondering. I'm just kidding. It makes sense theoretically. I just don't totally get it, but that's fine.
But it works well with the reaction too. Like you can react things together using ultrasonics too.
Okay, so it just speeds up the process.
Yeah,
that's
like
good enough for
taking
Jeff.
taking like weeks long or years long processes and condenses it down to a few hours.
Okay, and then what are the 3 immortal manifestations, and why is it called the philosophic egg?
The 3 immortal manifestations are the salt, sulfur, and mercury.
Oh, okay. Going back to that. So when you get into the ash, it's more in that those 3 immortal manifestations are
that
present.
Would be the salt.
That's the salt.
Yeah. Ash would be translated to the salt because it's the body.
And then you mix it with...
You would leach it with a water or a vinegar-like substance.
Which immortal manifestation is that?
That would still be the salt because you're basically working with, whereas when you first extracted the material, you pulled out the sulfur and the mercury. The sulfur being the essential oils or the oil content, which is going to be in most alcohol extracts, and the alkaloid profile, which is the spirit.
Okay.
That's the mind.
Okay.
Alkaloid profile is the mind, or like the active, alkaloids.
So you're putting those all back together again. In this philosophic egg.
Well, the philosophic egg is just a way to burn down extremely hard to reach mineral profiles of the salts.
Okay. And then you're adding in the other 2. You're adding in the...
the sulfur and the mercury.
The sulfur and the mercury.
Which the mineral salts are going to be crystallized. They're like a purified crystalline structure when they're dried. Because it was water that flushed through the ash, but the water... it strips the minerals, and that's the lixiviation part. It strips the minerals, and then it's contained within the water. And once you dry the water, evaporate it, you're left with this crystal matrix. That's the purified mineral salts. Then you have your ethanol that you pulled out of the same plant, which contains essential oils and alkaloids, so sulfur and mercury.
I see. Okay, and then you put those together.
You get this reaction. It's really cool reactions too. They're like bubble like trails that, like, especially with the ultrasonic machines, they make amazing sped up reactions, which would normally you would be sitting there watching at a snail's pace in your closet or whatever, if you're gonna like let it sit there. In an ultrasonic machine,
It just keeps getting weirder and weirder.
really fast.
You're sitting in your fucking closet over there.
Playing
Okay.
with trash.
So you watch it quickly. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it creates cool bubble effects.
Yeah, but you know, it's the reaction of cavitation, so it's really cool to see.
So my main experience with the products that you've created is Wachuma.
Oh yeah.
Just to kind of give people an example of what you're talking about in terms of like the potentiated state of the things that you're creating, like the, you know, that whatever you're doing with the elk antler, it's like super elk antler. You know, It's not just like eating a bone broth soup or whatever with some fucking velvet. Yeah. Wachuma, in case you don't know, is a plant medicine. It's made from a cactus called Wachuma. And it's been used in a lot of Native American traditions and ceremonies, and it's a really beautiful medicine that's mostly used in a very prayerful way. It's also been very helpful people getting over addictions and all kinds of stuff, and it's a really like intentional thing that I have done in ceremony before. And you know, when you're in ceremony, you drink big cups of the tea, and then of course you feel the effects, and you know, it sort of like melts the walls a little bit, but it's not crazy. It's not like ayahuasca. It's
very embodied.
Yeah. You're not going to have, you probably won't have crazy visions of things. You just feel more related.
It takes you further into the present moment, I would say. Most people would say and agree with that for sure.
Definitely. So Mica makes a spagyric of Wachuma. And he was like, hey, you just take a few sprays, you know, or you can drink the whole bottle. If you want to drink the whole bottle, it'll be like, you know, kind of a full send on the thing. And it's tiny. It's tiny. How many ounces? It's like 1 ounce. 2 milliliters is in this thing, right? Versus a giant cup. And so my wife, Christine, and I had a couple of friends in town who have never done Wachuma, have done some sort of, have had some psychedelic history. So it's not like totally foreign to them, but like never done Wachuma. And we were just like, well, this can't be, there's no way this can be that potent, you know, like compared to a giant glass. This is 2 milliliters. So we all just kind of toasted and drank. We each drank one. And then we went for a hike. We had this beautiful hike. It was amazing. We're on our way back from the hike, maybe an hour and a half later, you know, like fully heart open, just feeling the vibes. And then we all got in the car, which I was driving, and it was like, dude, first of all, it's a 15-minute drive. I'm pretty sure it took 3 years. And no question that we definitely went through some wormholes, you know? Yeah, it was like we were really lucky that the music on the radio was good. Yeah. And then we got home and we were just like, you know, like really feeling it very intensely, more intensely than I had ever felt Wachuma. It was a really beautiful experience, in part because, you know, I was with one of my best friends and we just like really got down and vibed together and started talking about Native American shamans and all kinds of stuff, and how there's some traditions where like people would go underground in a initiation or a ritual, and they would drink a brew, and then when they would come out to see the dawn, that's when the shaman would help create reality, whatever the reality was going to be. Which is really interesting. Story. I can't vouch for. I don't know. I was there, but I don't remember. You know, because it was a different life. We were starting to talk about that stuff, and then we had dinner plans. We had lunch plans, which we totally didn't do because nobody wanted to eat. And then we had dinner plans. We had this reservation at this amazing restaurant, 1228, who I also interviewed the guy from that. At 6:30, I was really excited to take these guys here. They're total foodies. And it was like, we were just looking at each other like, there's no possible way we can go to dinner. And the reservation was at 6 o'clock or 6:30. And then 6 o'clock hit and we were just flying. And then all of a sudden it just turned off like a switch, like no after effect, no hangover, no feeling weird, trying to react, just like perfectly right back in reality, ready to go to dinner and hang out, which we then did happily. But it was a really amazing experience of first of all, an incredibly intensified experience of that medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And then also it just ended. It just was like out like a flash. So that's my experience of, consuming some of the stuff that you create in terms of like its potency and effect. Like I can vouch for that it's a real phenomena.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, this Bajeric technology across the board enhances bioavailability, namely by being a saline solution. So what that means is being saline, it registers in the gut as pre-digested. So at that point, it just readily bypasses through cell membranes and can reach deeper into the cell tissues. And not only that, but it has a bit of a extended half-life in the body. While at the same time, because its metabolization is increased in speed, it'll most likely go through a bell curve, much faster. A lot of the stuff that I work with, namely being acute, if it's going to be an acute product, you want it to have that acute effect. So want it to reach those centers of the body quickly, give them that experience or give them that, effect, and then be removed. You don't want it to linger around and be crude and wait for the digestive system to sluggishly like move it through the body or urinate it out, whatever it is. So yeah, it helps to have that type of technology. And, with that said, what you're experiencing was the crystallization of an alkaloid. And that alkaloid is concentrated. Whereas me personally, I've had a long path with cactus. With the Native American Church, I've sat, in many peyote ceremonies. I've also been to Peru and did a lot of Wachuma work. And each time it was kind of like a sign that like I might have a hard time with this, like digestively. But over the course of, even working with the peyote church for 4 or 5 years straight on a really strong, like on the Red Road, really strong and being at ceremonies consistently, it just started to hit me in a really sideways way. And my stomach just couldn't handle it. I found myself being the guy who purges every single time in ceremony. And not only that, but my skin was crawling and I started getting rashes on my arms and my hands and my skin from working with the cactus. And I was like, what is going on? And I looked into it and sure enough, there's ways where you can sometimes get, allergies and work up to something like that in the body, where if misused or, taken too much or something like that. I don't know exactly what happened with me, but I think it just meant that I needed to take a break. Eating raw cactus can be really hard on the body. It's also the most alkaline vegetable on the planet, so definitely shifts your pH pretty fast, and that's where you get a lot of the consciousness shifts. But yeah, I had to figure it out because I'm like, this is my medicine. Like
this is what led you down the road.
Yeah, I was working with a number of friends. That was our full moon ceremonies when we first started working together. Was the first friend that passed me my book. It was him and I in the full moon, sitting together and doing extractions, creating one of the first cruder versions of what this is called. It's like a tar, and then salting that out into what's called a fumarate. And that's a way and a pathway to get to the isolate. So you're taking like an alkaloidal resin, which is full spectrum, still might be harsh for most people's digestive systems, and then you're salting out the isolated version. Of course, this is just that alone is a bit against the philosophy of alchemy. So myself and then a partner decided to go into other angles of working with this and wanted to reincorporate, parts of it. Not only is it extremely small amount of isolate that you would get from a material, it's like 3%, if you're lucky, 4% out of material, but it's very laborious. And coupled with the amount of time and resources and solvents and things that you have to use, it's close to not even worth it. It's really challenging. So there's ways to potentiate it. And a number of those methods including different alkaloidal profiles like MAOIs and incorporating these MAOI-Bs to enhance the effects. So we worked with that, and we worked with ways to allow everyone to take it. So it's a purified harmine or harmaline, not like the full spectrum MAOI that gets people sick as well. And yeah, did a lot of fusion. We're lucky that, especially peyote, but cactus creates a lot of mineral salts, tons. And, I had an abundance of that to work with it. And addressed so many ecological issues of, is this a good idea? It's obviously really time consuming to grow these plants. We don't want to just be using tons and tons and tons of material, but there's got to be a way to, multiply the effects. And through different methodologies and working different pathways, increasing the strength, we created something that was substantial, and gave people a chance to experience the purity of its soul and spirit, and also still give a little bit of the body load, which, was healing, especially taking any of the stuff. You could stay up really late, and then go to sleep for a nap and then wake up the next day and feel right as rain.
Mm-hmm.
But, ultimately you never want to introduce something that's so crude and harsh to the body that you're going to have to recover from it. I personally think that would be a bastardization of cactus itself. It contains like 40 to 70, depending on peyote or wachuma, alkaloids that are amazing for the body and are healing.
So you figured out a way to incorporate those, essentially.
Yeah, there's a way to include the soul. The spirit being the alkaloids, the soul being its consciousness. There's ways to transfer the soul of any living thing into a solution or an immortal vessel. But it requires some patented ways.
You don't have to give up your secrets. Yeah.
To communicate or teach somebody, but just so that we're on the same board, there are ways to transfer like a soul into other things. And it is, as much as it is practical laboratory work, it also is philosophical. They're one and the same. But, there's a lot of things in alchemy that are very much so seemingly philosophical, but they are felt in real time. Namely, you can look at almost all of the metal works and the mineral works. You're doing things like pyrolytic distillation and dry distillation, and you're looking at these things and you can't even see or tell that anything is happening. But meanwhile, you're removing this consciousness from, these what seem like inanimate objects and inseminating it into, these vessels. So it's pretty cool.
What do you mean? I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about. You take metal and you take the soul out and put it in something else?
Let's say we wanted to use the same template for gold, let's say.
Okay.
And you wanted to have a quintessence of gold.
Okay. You
got to have those 3 immortal manifestations, but are you going to burn down gold? No.
I don't know.
Not. It's pretty, you can melt it down.
Yeah.
But you couldn't treat it like a plant or an animal. You would have to treat it differently. And yes, those things are contained within that mineral, but there's different methodologies to acquire them. And what I was referencing when I was saying like pyrolytic distillation or dry distillation is it's something that in the perceivable mind, what you're doing looks philosophical. It looks like a ritual instead of an actual action. You know what I mean?
Sort of. What's the action?
Pyrolytic distillation.
Oh.
Or dry distillation.
It's philosophical in the sense that you're removing the soul.
What would be perceived to someone else. Yeah. What might be perceived. Yeah. There's ways that you can communicate this, but I would have to get into like some more advanced mineral and
no, I'm already lost, and so are they.
and it's just really amazing to witness. It's like the first time I took, my first drop of oil of gold, or the tincture of an oil of gold. I was floored. I was like sleep deprived. I didn't want to drink caffeine, and I had gotten this gold from a friend of a friend who was an alchemist at the time, and I decided to take this drop when I was completely just, exhausted. And it took me from a state of being like, let's go to bed, to then being able to operate with a sharp mind for a number of hours. It was amazing. But I mean, that's what gold does. It's pure consciousness. It's the sun. So
say the Egyptians also.
Yeah. And there's, all these other metals have different characteristics, silver, copper. They're also associated with different planets and their influences. So you can get into deeper, actions and ways that these metals attribute to how they're applied to other ways of being in like ritual use. But namely, like the oil of gold is amazing. It's something I love to incorporate in like ritual or like ceremony as a means to give everyone in the present moment and like tie us all together and like weigh us in this like very presence.
Cool. You can make an oil out of gold.
Yeah.
Can you make gold out of lead or something?
I don't know if I ever want to try that. It seems really laborious, and from what I've been told, you get a very small amount. Like you get like less than like 2% or something of the original weight. You know, if you take lead and you go through the process of alchemically transferring it to gold, you get a tiny amount. It can be done, but it's just, is it worth it? You know? So, but yeah, it's possible. I've seen processes where metals are transformed into other metals, like, you know, silver to gold or copper to silver and things like that.
Okay. That's easier.
I don't know if it's easier, but it's a thing.
Yeah. We started with Toth a little bit, talking about Toth, and I'm fascinated by that dude. He's got like a bird head.
He should be.
Yeah, he's also the ruler of the moon. So Lunacy is actually Tothacy in a way.
Absolutely.
Toth is the ancient Egyptian god, but he's also said to have ruled from 50,000 BC to 38,000 BC as an actual
human.
Well, whatever. He has a bird head, so I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if he's
you know, and it's lost in
like.
translation, but he's also Hermes.
And he's the embodiment of wisdom, right?
Writing and science.
Language.
Language.
And also alchemy.
Said to be one of the ones that brought it to, you know, humanity, which, you know, from my understanding, Thoth it's a multidimensional being, but it's, in a lot of ways, it's like the divine mind of the god, or a god. It's the, you know, divine Mercury, which is the intermediary communication device of this thing we are experiencing. And that represents itself as Hermes, you know, as the great messenger, or Mercury, you know, the planet. But it's interesting because, you know, being the god of the moon reflects the sun. It doesn't emit light itself. It's dark void. But it reflects the consciousness, the pure consciousness of source energy of the sun. And so what that does is it's like organized thought. It's like organizing thoughts to then be emitted down to us. We receive that. Like, let's say on a day like today, how many of us experience anomalies on a full moon? I mean, I can tell you like 5 that just happened to me today. That, you know, it's like a crazy day. But, you know, a lot of energy comes through on a full moon. And that's the source energy being organized and then reflected down to us, which says a lot of, you know, how the mind works, because Thoth is the god of the mind, and Mercury also works with the mind in that way too. But it being the spirit or the messenger, it also shows us how that intermediary, you know, platform works. Is we have this mind, we receive a lot of things. People say we think thoughts, like I thought this. I feel like we receive thoughts.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
You know, you can be sitting
and there are a lot of thoughts that I didn't want to think that came into my head.
You can be sitting in meditation, you know, and like in your third person observer, and you'll witness your perceived self, think thoughts. And that's just you can like watch those pass by like clouds. Those are real things that come into you and you're receiving them.
That is actually
you can think of it however you want, but that's how I think most people see it nowadays.
Yeah. That is the Zen way, is to sit and look at the thoughts that you're having as if they're clouds and just allow them to pass. Yeah. And then just keep being in that space, and then eventually, I mean, at least having an experience of oneness, but also like that you're receiving things. That's the Zen way. It's just about being fully present in here. Yeah. So at least, you know, not this being idea that you're receiving thoughts is really, that's good. I like that. Yeah, not being so like alienated that you're like, you know, disassociating from your reality, but like witnessing these thoughts and at least giving like some time to not react but respond to your environment. Yeah. If more people did that, we'd be living in an amazing world. One of the things that I was so struck by about ancient Egypt is like all the statues of the pharaohs and kings and whatnot, they're all leading with their left foot. You see them all with their left foot forward. And then one of the interpretations of that is that they're leading with their heart forward, and they're fully erect, you know, so that's not just an accident. That's like their posture's fully erect. They're not slumping over. They're not hiding things. They're not in fear. You know, they're fully open and in the heart. And so like And part of the ancient Egyptian philosophy, and who knows how far back it goes, and also Buddhist philosophy, etc., is to like lead with the heart, feel the feelings fully, and then think about what it is that you're going to do, and then take the action that you're going to do, which is the essence of what it means to respond versus react. You know, what I find is that we get caught, at least myself, I know something will happen, I'm hurt by it or whatever, it triggers some trauma thing that happened when I was 6, and then all of a sudden, you know, like my mind goes, oh, attack, defend yourself, say something that's whatever. And then instead of like fully allowing myself to feel that thing, the pain or whatever, and observe it and witness it like in my heart, and then think about, what do I do with this? What's the lesson from it? What's going to be the thing that's really going to alchemize this emotion that I'm having into something beneficial for the other person, instead of lashing out, which I think is so much of what we do and what we've been trained to do, because that's what everybody around us is doing. We've been trained to lead from the head and not the heart. So I think that's really valuable to consider.
Yeah. Misidentifying, yourself from, being a mind, but also being a body. Because what does the mind do? The thoughts that come into the mind, they do inspire emotion. And we live in this beautiful blue planet of many oceans. So being, especially Thoth, the god of the moon, he's very much an influential part of the mind, but it's influencing our hearts and our emotions that we experience, because the moon is pulling all these tides. So it's pretty amazing to see. It's like a really real world part of like seeing the doctrine of signature in nature, where like something is acting how it is in like the philosophic world, but it's, also representing itself in the real world the way it works. So pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm into it. Let's go. Let's go, Thoth. Thoth. I never know how to. It's very strange.
Tahuti. It also goes by Tahuti.
I thought my name was hard to pronounce. Jeff with a G and an O. Bizarre, but Thoth or Thoth. I never know. Anyway, we love you. Lunacy is for you. Thoth. Mica, for you, what is sacred and what is insane?
Sacred. For me, what is sacred? I think what is sacred to me is being within the observation of the magic of everyday life, and having the ability to witness that and like know it and observe it, and having like the gift of seeing that on a daily basis when you can through the chaos of life. I think that's sacred. I think like having that observation and that ability to be there and know it when you're gifted those chances, which are few and far between sometimes, that's sacred to me. It's like without words, you don't need to speak. Sometimes nobody else knows. You could be the only one there. But if you share it with someone else, it's even more sacred, Two different viewpoints being like confirmed in this like amazing magical portal of something showing you how like life works or something. So it's always good to have a friend in the lab.
Yeah. Okay.
At least one.
Good.
What's insane to me is having the ability to know all this and be of God and being close to this, sacred thing that's undescribable, and, it's so mystical, yet being this monkey and being tied to this body and this physicality, and sort of like having to transcend that on a daily basis in the pure chaos of the balance, like having to be here in it now, but like being put through the fires and the chaos and knowing it's insane, but going through it because it's all this crazy oxymoron. It's an axiom, let's say. That's just fully, it's wild, and it drives a lot of people crazy. And I think what's insane to me is that we all, like, at the end of the day, we go to sleep at night and we forget about it and wake up and do it all over again. And it just keeps going, and it's just this wild experience. That's insane to me.
Nice. That's awesome. I dig it. I'm into it. All right, let's go. You know, the insanity, waking up every day, going to bed. Where do we go when we go to bed? I don't know. It's very bizarre.
Go to sleep and forget
It
about
is insane. Yeah. Where can they find you?
You can reach me on Instagram at axiom_formulas.
Beautiful. And if you have like an idea for a spagyric or something, or your company that's interested in making something, you can contact him. If you want to learn more about alchemy, you can contact him. You can also follow him. He's always dropping little buckets of knowledge here and there, wisdom. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Lunacy podcast. Any and all support is welcome to continue doing this work. Love you so much. We'll see you next time.